everybody, and welcome back to my channel. I am Jen, and this is Fundy Fridays, and I am joined here today with the lovely Jordan of Jordan and McKay.
Hello. So happy to be back.
And we are good friends and also longtime Fundy snarkers, and I just felt that she had good expertise. And yes, this is a topic that could only be done justice with both of us, I think. So, yes, you have wisdom and fortitude and strength. But anyway, but seriously, Jordan is a therapist as her day job. So I felt like it would be appropriate to have her here because we're going to be talking about some really traumatic and awful things today. And I wanted to make sure that we did it with grace and respect. And I feel like it'd be a good idea to have you around.
I'm honored.
I'm so honored to be in your life. So let's begin talking today about Michael Mershon, who is one of the Girl Defined brothers. It's so funny when I say Girl Defined as like that's their name though. Like that's who they are. Like if I said a Baird brother, nobody would know who that is. So
Nobody would know.
He recently posted to Reddit like a really bombshell story about how he was sexually abused as a child, and he's saying that his mother knew about this and did nothing about it, and then we come to find out quite a few years later she's like sending him these text messages that are very demeaning and disrespectful and just not wanting to take accountability for it. And it's really interesting because this is so recent, and I think that it came out because of Shiny Happy People. I think a lot of people are finally coming to terms with what happened to them, or now they finally have words for it. Or I feel bad because it sounds like his mom is not having a good reaction, and it's just really unfair.
It is. And I think that's one of the I see parallels. Obviously, Girl Define's not as big as the Duggars, but parallels with a very public social media family and having to come forth with information like this, knowing how it can impact the public perception. Like very similar.
And before we get into like reading the post, we're going to discuss, I guess, how we want to go about this. What are our ethics going forward with this? What do we want to take out? How much are we going to show? I know I'm going to censor anything graphic. And then if you're watching this and you're a Fundy Snarker, you probably do know his mom's real name and how to view her social media or whatever, but we're not trying to make this about that. We're not trying to start a harassment campaign. And if you do that on behalf of us, I will revoke your Genonite citizenship badge. And I will be laying the biblical smackdown. So yes, don't go contact her. And I don't want to say that any of the Girl Defined sisters like were complicit in anything, or they probably didn't even know that this was happening. But I just think it's interesting because when they did their reaction to Shiny Happy People, they were like, well, we weren't abused. We don't know anybody who, whatever. They were like very much like what about isms and all side isms when it has, what's the other side to abuse, Jordan? Who are they supposed to interview? So it's just really interesting. And I thought this was going to go farther than it was. Like there was rumors for a while that there was going to be an AMA. Knowing our luck, there's going to be one the day after we film this, which, I'll come back to. But he's answered a few questions and he's made a few posts. So we have a little bit of a picture. But Girl Define hasn't put out a normal video. And I think Bethy's still talking about her intercourse.
Yep.
And the mom hasn't posted since this has come out.
A few things. I think censoring the information that's not like super necessary, because I think we as humans have a natural inclination to want, think about, true crime podcasts and things. Like we're very interested in details of things, and I don't know that that's really necessary here. If people want to go find it, I guess he talked about it in the video, so they can. But I think your point about his mom is important, because we can still talk about the cycle, we can still talk about the problem, we can still talk about kind of the shame and things that are perpetuated without directing it at her, because while this was specifically her, this is also a lot bigger than her. So this is just a nice way to, like, I hate to say nice way, but a good kind of talking point, I guess, for exploring this a little further. I think there's, something to be said for, you know, the problem is they're all public figures. Like, he's not, I mean, he kind of relatively is. He does have a YouTube channel, but I think we talked about like a week or so ago, like, concept of, self-determination. Like, he has the right to share his story because it's his. And unfortunately, she played a role in it that wasn't great. And she can't change that, and neither can he. And it's his story, so he's kind of entitled to tell it.
I feel like the whole point of his post was that he wanted this story to be boosted. And he's kind of made his social media presence about wanting people to reach out and talk about this because, but like he comes at it a lot from the angle of like when it happens to a man. And so it's really important to him that he talk about that because in fundy
Uh,
circles, it's probably generally not acknowledged, even though it's
Prevalent?
prevalent.
Yes.
So this, when it came on the scene, we weren't sure if it was legit or not because I believe he tried to go to the regular Fundy Snark Uncensored, um, and he didn't have verification, so he went over to Fundy Snarky Snark, which we all know is the depths of hell. And then eventually he got verification, and we even have the messages that his mom sent. But this ended up being legit, and he answered some questions in the bottom. So we also followed like all the links to his social media, and he looks like he is a member of that family. So, and then his name is Michael Mershon, not Michael Baird, because the men have started changing their name over to one of the grandpa's names. I think not the Nazi one. Uh,
Not that one.
he was adopted, and this would be like his real last name or whatever. So the men have been changing over, and the women don't change it because they're gonna get married and have a new name anyway. All right. Truth from the oldest Baird child. I am the oldest Baird child, and I don't align with much, if anything, of what my sisters, Girl Defined, say. They get enough hate and they don't need it from me as well. I never paid attention to that line. I will not talk shit about my sisters despite disagreeing with them. That being said, much of what they preach is fundamentalist and does damage, but they are just pawns in a larger game. If you've made it this far and your head didn't explode at the mention of Girl Defined, then let me tell you why I'm here. I'm here to speak my truth about the abuse I suffered at the hands of my parents, but specifically my mother. I was raised in the Gothard ATI world. I was homeschooled my entire life and was a victim of ongoing abuse of multiple kinds. I am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse by a female neighbor when I was around 7 years old. I know my mother knew about it because she walked in on it happening. It has never been spoken of to this day, and if that were the only time, that would have been bad enough. I was also groomed and sexually abused at around 11 years old by a male neighbor at our next house. I was made to feel like a victim and that it was my fault, which led to repressed memories that didn't resurface till I was in my 30s. It has been roughly 5 years since I started dealing with my past sexual abuse, and to this day have never received anything close to a sincere apology from my mother. To this day, my mother accuses me of, quote, living in a victimhood mentality that I need to take to God and let him heal me from. My mother is a toxic person, and nothing that you see on any of her posts is authentic or real, as if you needed me to tell you that. I cannot change what was done to me or get the years of my childhood I was robbed of back, but I can do my part to prevent her from hurting anyone else. I have attached a screenshot of one of the recent texts I got from my mother blaming me for subjecting myself to cynical counseling system that will keep me stuck, and also stating that I am making victimhood an idol. Judge for yourself if you believe it is true or not and use it however you want to, but I have nothing to gain except freedom from the oppression I have lived with for so many years. I imagine that the feeling of like the liberating feeling of finally being able to talk about it is like worth the backlash you get.
Yeah, I mean, for me it was and I that's not to say that the backlash isn't horrible, because, my mom came after me after I went public with mine. And so I can only imagine that, I mean, I don't know if he has his mom blocked or what the situation is, but I can only imagine that if he doesn't, he got some words, which makes it hard. It does. It makes it, there's nothing like, in my therapy lens, the people's response to, like, people reacting to you sharing that you were abused, like their reaction sometimes is so detrimental that for some people, like, the bad reaction can be worse than the abuse itself. And so I imagine for her to just walk in on it and then be like, whatever.
Like, it was her choice to ignore it, and it was her choice to say these horrible things to him when he tried to talk about it. Like, not only has she's failed as a parent like 100-fold. Like, I can't imagine. And yeah, I'm sure it was really scary for him, and I'm really glad that he has we know that his wife is a therapist, a secular one, and he seems like he's got a good head on his shoulders, and he has a supportive community, because yeah, that can be really fucking hard, and it's why people don't come forward, because it's
Well,
just
then
not worth the hassle, you know.
exactly. Well, and then to your point, it makes me wonder about shiny happy people because his sisters got on there, like you said, and were like, we don't know anybody who's been abused. I mean, that would have, if I was him, that would have sent me through the roof. I mean, the texts are absolutely asinine. We aren't going to agree on many things, but we have hope we can experience a biblical resolution with you both. What we hear from you both is a lot of anger, fear, control, and blame shifting. After years of counseling, why is there still so much bitterness and judgment? It seems that you are trapped in a cyclical counseling system that never has an end. Biblical counseling done God's way brings healing. It has an end. There is freedom and there is victory in Christ. Biblical counseling walks you to freedom, hope, and peace, not an unending life of cycle. Oh, we got Bethany here of fear, anxiety, and bondage. Victimhood can become an idol that, when threatened, fears losing control and becomes angry at those that seek a resolution. It's the only life a victim knows. That's how well meaning counselors and therapists
Ugh.
keep clients in years of a cyclical system of never ending sessions with no hope of an end. It does not seek resolutions and forgiveness. Michael and Jamie, God offers an end to all of this. He offers freedom, peace, and hope. But we are asking for a resolution because we love you both and we know it's what God calls us to. We are at peace, we have hope, and we love you both. Let's sit down and have a loving, peaceful adult conversation that honors God. No fear, no anger, no threats, just God's loving grace and mercy.
Not only is this a glowing review of Christian counseling, but it's victim blaming, and it's just the best type of fundy double speak I've ever seen.
It
The levels
is
of passive aggression.
the exclamation points after like every sentence. This
And
is
you
so bad.
Bethy is very into biblical counseling, and in the video that she did with Dave talking about how awesome it was, she was saying that secular counseling makes you traps you in this victimhood shit. Shocking and appalling to me to hear people say that that's what happens in secular therapy.
For people who've probably never been to secular therapy.
No.
It's anger oozed from my pores like the first time I read this. Like, this is, I mean, victim shame, victim blame, minimize, invalidate, like any horrible word you could possibly use is she threw it in here, and all with the perfect like keep sweet charm of
Mm-hmm.
it's God's way.
Because,
It's
like, by saying that, you admit that something bad happened to them, and in the same sentence you're going to say, like, oh, but you're too into it.
totally. I mean, it's a way to avoid accountability. Like, if it's just like, you're just being a victim about it, then like, I don't have to own any piece of this that's possibly mine because it's your problem.
Yeah, and at no point is she acknowledging fault in this.
Not at all. And it's very much, I mean, it puts everything back on him for something that is not a him problem.
Mm-hmm. I don't remember that. I don't remember it happening that way.
He did talk about how he walked away from Christianity in one of them.
So I wonder if that's going to be used as like ammo in the family. They're going to be like, well, you deconstructed, you don't really know God, so I don't really.
Yep.
So messed up, because I think he said in the video too that he first went to somebody in the church and they were like, we need to keep this in house. Like, the fact that that's procedure, like, yeah.
Standard now in too many religions at this point.
I have thus far protected, or at least not openly criticized, my mother despite the blatantly false narrative she has had about growing up in her home. 2 different neighbors sexually abused me at 2 different homes. She claims not to have known it happened the second time, but she walked in on it happening. God, just like, how big of a piece of shit You know, and like all the things that are implied with ignoring it. Like, I feel for my sisters and view them as victims of the same fucked up ideals that ruined my life. I cannot speak to their current beliefs, but I was raised under Bill Gothard's teachings. I've attended at least 5 basic conferences. Oh yeah. He has his alert badge
Oh yeah,
as
I did
proof. I'll
see
have to
that.
pull that up. Okay. Ooh, interesting. He says that he did not want to be affiliated with the Bairds. That's why he changed his name to Mershon. So a different reason than the other ones, but nonetheless.
Yeah.
My goal is to expose and provide tangible testimony or evidence that people can use to start to dismantle her social media following and expose her for the fraud she is before she hurts anyone else. Simple yet extremely complicated answer. In a nutshell, I walked away from everything related to Christianity and have yet to fully come back. I am in the process of figuring out what I believe. As for alert, I was there for all 3 phases, so a year and a half. In a word, I grew up with a narcissist as a mother. I think it's very important to understand why I love my sisters despite what I may think of the content they post. I believe that they are victims as much as I was, and I wish to do what I can to save them from the toxicity that is my mom. The best way I can see to save my siblings is to expose my mom for the fraud that she is. I cannot remember having a single honest conversation with my mother. I don't remember ever receiving any sincere affection from her, and she had an end motive to everything she did. I learned that to survive my childhood, I was going to have to suppress any emotion, ask no questions, and play the obedient son. Image was, and from what I can see, is everything to her. I experienced many forms of punishment, from being spanked so hard wood spoons broke, to being forced to move from a bedroom in the main house to a converted garage they made a portion of into a bedroom so my sister could have her own room. I was kicked out of the house by my mom on several occasions in my teenage years. I had my bedroom door removed on multiple occasions because I either slammed it or locked it without permission. Other times I was removed from my room and forced to live on a cot in our schoolroom with 3 open shelves for my things. I was basically a warning to all the other kids in the house of what can happen if they disobey. I feel deeply for my sisters as they grew up with the same mother. This is from my perspective, so I cannot speak for them, but I can speak to what I saw and how I perceived things. For the girls, school was never an option, and they were raised to be married off to men that my mother approved of. I feel deeply for them because they were essentially turned into mini versions of my mom. I understand the hate they receive on here, and I would say that they are simply pawns in my mother's world. I am making it my mission to stop my mom from hurting any more people, and the best way I see to do that is speak my truth despite what my family may think or say of me. Burn it down, dude.
Damn right.
It makes the wanting to conceal her identity complicated because he does want to take her down, but I also know that I have this big platform and I'm really not trying to fucking, harass anybody on this large scale.
Oh, I thought that was interesting.
What?
They were talking about meeting like together in therapy, and his stipulation was as a
Okay.
licensed counselor, and she refused.
It is funny you suggest that. I told her I was happy to meet in person as long as it was with a licensed counselor that was familiar with child sexual abuse. She refused to meet unless she could bring her own Christian counselor.
I don't know if this is like a common thing, but my mom did the same thing.
Really?
Yes. She wanted to like meet up, and I'm a firm believer that it's in most situations it's not productive to go to therapy with your abuser. Like that's my stance for most situations. But she would only like her caveat was it had to be with her therapist, which I would never do in a million years.
Yeah, what's the fucking point?
None.
I remember my dad being much more compassionate and caring. I have had authentic conversations with my dad in the past, and he has been very willing to help whenever I need anything. He has been silent on this subject, but he also has a very different personality, so it is hard to say for sure where he is in this. At the moment, I am no contact with my mother. I honestly have nothing to say to her. I would like to preserve a relationship with my siblings, but also to speak my truth, even if they don't agree or understand. I am standing firm and I'm not going to be silenced. Thank you for the huge outpouring of love. Yeah. I mean, that's something that I'm proud of in this community is that when you really need that support, they come through.
They do, and I bet this was really important for him to see too.
He talks about this video, trigger warning, if you're going to watch this video, he does go into detail of like specifically what happened between him and his abusers.
With everything else that had happened, there was no way I could go and tell my parents that, oh yeah, now I had done all these things, plus this happened and this happened. So for one, I felt more like an accomplice or a participant in it because I had more or less gone along with everything else up to that point, because each one took me a little further and gave him more control over me, so I didn't feel like I could say no. But ultimately, it was something that I had no ability to tell my parents, and quite frankly, I don't think was ever even on their radar in any way, shape, or form. So that led to a very disruptive childhood, as you can imagine. Having that happen at 10, I was probably 11 when it all ended. Never telling anybody about it, nobody ever knowing about it, and having to live with that and carry that for the next 22 years. As you can imagine, that was not something that I had the capacity to deal with. I wanted to deal with. I was quite literally just trying to survive.
Because then he'd have to like admit to the other things he had done, like smoking cigarettes and stealing. He didn't feel like he could come to you because of the environment that you created. So once again, that is the parents' fault, because there is no universe where a child should be afraid to tell their parents that they were abused, except it happened in this family. And what happened? He got kicked out of the house. Like, oh my God.
Unbelievable.
And I remember very vividly that I would act out in these crazy ways at home. Very angry, very rebellious, very just pissed off at my parents, at life, at just everything, because I was hurting and I was wounded and I didn't know what to do. So my cries for help were perceived as they were perceived as anger and hatred and rebelliousness, and basically the end result was that I was punished. It got so bad at one point that I was actually kicked out of my room and had to move into a cot where I had 3 shelves as punishment. It escalated further to one point when I was around 16 where I actually got kicked out of the house. Or technically, I guess I left of my own accord because they gave me an ultimatum and I figured I could just do it on my own. So I lasted a whole night or maybe 2, I don't even remember. But then I was back at home and decided that I would just kind of suck it up and get through the next, couple of years till I left the house.
All behavior is communication. No parent is perfect, but when you have a child that's acting out to this degree, it should always raise a flag for what's going on here. Because yes, some things are just normal teenage behavior, but these were very clearly cries for help that went unanswered.
And my first steps were to contact our church, because they did have some people that dealt with counseling, and they were very intent on keeping everything inside the church. So I went to, and actually, truthfully, it wasn't even me that went to it. I couldn't even have that conversation. So Jamie had to go to the appropriate people there and just let them know that there was a conversation that was had last night, and this is what's come out. And as a result of that, I entered into counseling with one of the pastors at our church. And to be completely blunt and honest, and again, nothing that they did was intended to harm, but it set me back further than it helped me, because they were just not equipped to handle what I was going through, especially being that fresh and that, recently, having been that recently revealed. It was just, quite frankly, it was a disaster. So after about 4 or 5 months of that, I ended up going to a different counselor, a professional counselor that had a PhD, again, Christian counselor, because I had been conditioned that mental health was bad as a kid, and that anything dealing with mental health, you just needed to pray more and read your Bible, and then God would take it away. So having that mentality, I felt like I had to go to a Christian counselor, because a secular, quote unquote, secular counselor was not an option.
That's pretty fucking awful.
It's way fucked up that somebody in a helping profession has actually caused this much harm.
We know that he eventually got legitimate counseling, but for most people in his position, it kind of stops here. Like, you just have a bad time, maybe you don't go back, or maybe you try for several years and you're just spinning your wheels. Have you ever been to Christian counseling, or you just like know about it from the outside?
I never personally went, but I was attempted to be counseled by a bishop once.
Well.
How effective that was.
Well, pretty much everybody that Michael relied on for safety and love let him down. And now he is a badass advocate. And I mean, he seems to be doing a lot better. And now he's trying to take down one of his abusers. So more power to him.
Hell yeah.
Okay, so that was really heavy. Hope everybody's doing all right. And I will say that, I mean, it's been all quiet on the Girl Defined front. We'll see what happens.
I mean, he at least spoke very kindly of his sisters.
Very maturely, like better than a lot of us, you know.
You might have to look to see if this is actually true, but I saw in one of the threads somebody said that Dave commented on one of his videos and said that it was like really informative and helpful.
Okay. I would like to apologize to Dave if I made you delete your Instagram, because that was not my intention.
I don't blame him for not wanting to be on there.
Every day I wake up and want to delete it too, so you know. Yeah, final thoughts. I mean, he's just extremely brave, and it took a lot of guts to come forward, especially since his family is public. They're not like famous for a good reason, you know. So, yeah.
No, not at all. I mean, it's very brave, very vulnerable, very courageous to just put it out there, and knowing that the base that they have will probably potentially discredit him based on, you know, the fact that he's not Christian anymore or any other kind of nonsense. Like, that's hard to take. So the fact that he's still willing to put it out there anyway is it's a pretty big deal.
I will be very shocked if they say anything.
I will be too.
And technically it is none of our business, but he, you know, that's his story and he decided to tell it, and I'm here to support him. So
yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate, but they all were in control of how they interacted with him. So unfortunately for them, that's just how it rolls.
Thank you for your words of wisdom and your friendship and your fellowship.
And in Christ.
We are. If you want to follow Jordan, it's Jordan and McKay on everything.
On everything. Thank you for having me on. As always, I love being here. McKay's somewhere else, but this was fun.
Yes, we'll do this again very soon.
Yes.
Bye. I'll see you later.